Hi everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Most Awesome Founder podcast. And today we have as our guest Björn Maronde. Björn, welcome to this podcast.
Welcome, Dries. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. And as you might know, we always start this podcast with quite a simple and straightforward question. Namely, we want to give the floor to our guests to say something about their personal background. Where are you coming from? So go ahead, I would say.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm Björn. I'm 42 years old. Actually, I live in Hamburg and also grow up quite near to Hamburg. Originally, I studied law and also did my PhD in law. But realized, especially due to my best friend and later co-founder at Exporo, Simon, that being an entrepreneur is much more interesting and much more vibrant than being a lawyer. And at that time, I decided, okay, maybe not following a professional career in law, but change a bit. The course had some corporate stations, but then later on already started my first companies.
Yeah, okay. And actually, I saw in LinkedIn that you also did an executive MBA,
Yes.
the Kellogg WHU MBA. And as I understood it, maybe I'm wrong, but it was a bit, you did the executive MBA and then you also pivoted towards this more entrepreneurial career. Did the MBA trigger that, or am I now reading stuff into the data that are not there?
I think I was triggered already before.
Okay.
But I thought I was not equipped enough to become a founder, and I thought, okay, where to go to get a little bit of entrepreneurial experience, and therefore WHU was the place to go for me. And in parallel, I already had my first company, but there was only employed managing director. It was a spin-off, so to say. And in the end, so my master's thesis at my Kellogg WHU executive MBA was with a former colleague of you in the entrepreneurship stuff. And there I did my master's thesis about with a business case. Actually, that never became reality, that business case, but that's how it is sometimes.
Yeah, but because you were saying, okay, I felt that I did not have the necessary capabilities. Can you describe a bit more what kind of capabilities you felt missing before you would take the jump into the deep water of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, as people say, juris not calculus. So I thought that, okay, getting a little bit more background in accounting and statistics and all those basic stuff, and I really, and I'm a learner guy. So whenever I have a new topic, I try to read everything about it. And I thought, nevertheless, being an entrepreneur, you need to have some business background.
Yeah. And so this executive MBA just helped you to build these kind of basic foundations for just not only starting a company, but also running a company in the end.
It's like always, afterwards you realize that probably 90% was not needed. But at least I think I get a lot of trust in myself and my capabilities. And being also already a managing director at that time, I could implement some of the stuff. And even now, sometimes I'll go back to my notes from that time.
Okay. Interesting. I also read that you once tried to start a pizza vending machine startup.
Yeah, actually, I joined it later on. So it was already founded by two guys, but they were all both working in parallel. And at some point, it was too much to do. And then they asked me to get into this journey, and it was interesting. And one main lesson is that I learned is that it's easy to found a company, but it's really difficult to close it down. So this company still exists. It's still in the liquidation phase. And I think it's also good that we close it down quite soon, but it's not easy to
And did you have other learnings up from this failure? So what did you learn from this first kind of startup experience that later on in your other startups you used to be more successful?
So it was a physical business in a way. So it was this, we had this huge pizza vending machines, and then the pizzas were frozen, and then they need to be cooked up within the oven. What I realized that having logistics involved, especially cooling logistic, is really a headache when you don't have the infrastructure set up properly before. So operational complexity can get quite messy, and we did the typical startup error. So we had locations all over the place, and then coordinating everything, having cooling infrastructure at all places. That was not really perfect. And
okay, so it was a kind of logistical nightmare.
Yes, also being dependent on your suppliers is something that I learned at that time is not easy, because especially when you have a product that is not ready yet, but you try to build a business on it.
Yeah. Okay. Clear. Now, the next step, I think, was then the founding of Exporo, which I think is much more a success story. Can you explain maybe briefly why you decided to start Exporo and what it exactly is?
So, as already mentioned, Simon, my best friend, we met when we were 11. We were always in close connection and talked about businesses. He, at that time, had an insurance company with 400 brokers. So trying to disrupt this insurance industry, but it was still an offline business, and we discussed a lot about what we wanted at some point, found something together. And by accident, I was searching for new stuff. I met a guy in Munich who was already talking about this real estate investing, crowd investing for real estate stuff. And I talks about it with Simon, and we said, oh, it's really interesting. And he had some infrastructure here in Hamburg about this real estate industry. And there can be a long story because we tried to build it together with the Munich guy, which was a mess.
Okay.
But later on, we founded it in Hamburg with actually 4 founders, another guy from our school, and one with a real estate background. And it's basically, from the business model point of view, it's a platform for investing. So private investors on the one side who try to invest in fractional or in small tickets in real estate. And on the other side, we had people who were searching for capital, professional real estate developers, and they introduced their projects to us. We did a due diligence on it. Then we did the whole structuring of, and then we intermediated the capital. It was quite successful. I think we raised a ton of capital during the last years, and it was also quite an interesting story to go from 0 employees to 250. Today it's back to 100. Like always, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah. Maybe one thing I want to briefly touch upon, because you said I did this together with Simon, who was my best friend from when I was 11 years old. To be honest, when I teach entrepreneurship at WHU, one recommendation I give to my students: do not found a company with your best friend. Because, you might know each other very well, but you put a lot of stuff at stake, because if the startup goes wrong, and that's quite a likely outcome of a startup that it goes wrong, you might not only have the failure of not having the startup successfully, but maybe your precious relationship that you have with this person might also be contaminated by the failure of your startup. Was that something that you considered, or did you mainly see the advantages of starting it with him?
I mainly saw the advantages, honestly, and I was totally inspired, and I had a lot of trust in him, and also in our working together, so that we had a lot of trust. But honestly, there are those times where relationships are not at stake, maybe, but at risk a little bit, and then it's really important to have the right level, so that you can also talk about the hard stuff. And actually, in that regard, I'm super happy. I joined Entrepreneurs Organization. I don't know if you know this European, worldwide club of entrepreneurs who meet quite regularly in small forum style stuff. And I learned to talk about also emotions there. And Simon also joined EO. So I think we get a lot of how to talk also with the hard stuff there.
And can you explain a bit more about how you do that? So you're facing a difficult decision, or maybe you have a fundamental disagreement on how to move forward. So that, for me, it seems a very difficult thing to do with your best friend, because you have this kind of long... For me, it's easier to fight with somebody that I only know less or more superficially than with a really good friend. So do you have a certain approach to overcome that issue?
We don't have a special approach. I would say fighting with Simon, or the fighting stuff, was never so difficult. I think it was when we had difficult times, it was more that third parties are involved, and especially investors. So, but even then, I would say there's probably the best recipe is just taking time outside of the business also together, especially when you really, our relationship was always more important than the business stuff. Easy to say, I know, but in the end, that's the case. And I would say taking a weekend off and climbing the mountains in the Alps, and then even not talking, but having a good time together, it's really good.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, then let's jump a bit to today. So today you have started another company called Smace. Can you explain a bit more what you're trying to accomplish with this company? What kind of pain point does it try to solve?
Yeah. So maybe it's easier to start also with my co-founder there, because my co-founder I met at Exporo. So he was my first employee in tech. So I was responsible for tech and marketing. He was a programmer. And then he basically became the CTO of Exporo for quite a long time. So he 1.5 years ago decided to leave Exporo, and we always said, but when we found something together, we should do it together, because we already have proven that it's really that we can work together quite successfully and quite good, because we have I would say, a hands-on mentality, and like to build stuff, find solutions. And in the beginning, it was not the name Smace, but when we talked about building something, we talked about having ISO certification processes to digitize those, because we had a challenge to do a certification process in Exporo together, and we realized that there's no software that can actually so far there is no software to help to do this complex process. But we started thinking about it. We already had some concepts. Actually, we also already built an MVP, but we realized it's really too heady what we have built. So it was too much head involved and not so much. But it was already something where collaboration was in the heart of the solution. So collaborating at the interface between different parties. That was actually the foundation of also the ideas before. And then we realized, we have built something nice, but the use case is not there, or there were already some startups tackling that. And we thought, there might be other places there where this could fit in. And we had 2 different experiences, I would say, that helped us a little bit. It was first also Exporo related. B2B relations. So when Exporo was in the connection with the project developers, it was onboarding a project. It took more than 100 days, and there was really this pain of back and forth email information sending stuff. So in these long emails with questions, and there was this in-answer reply. You can find my answers down there in other colors, and I said, that's really, and even though it was not my part of the business, I realized that it's really nobody could ever say where is the project currently, when can it go live, where is actually the bottleneck currently. And then another experience was also during the time of Exporo, but not so much related. It was at some point we wanted to introduce SAP as a software, and it was a long project. It was anticipated actually to take only 3 to 6 months because we were building on a pre-defined solution with an implementation partner. Ultimately, it was more than a year, never got live. So the implementation was never finished. And it was probably at least $1 million, probably when you take in the opportunity cost of the project, much more. So it was really a bad experience when it comes to onboarding software. So coming back to the problems that we want to solve, really, we want to... we see that especially in B2B environments, email is still the operating system in many cases when you have a communication between one company, a supplier, and his customer. So especially there. And so it's really email, maybe Excel sheets or Google Sheets where people need to provide information. And on the others, and then where do we see especially this problem? When it's about onboarding processes. So when you have a commitment for a relation, but you don't have the solution implemented yet. So that's where we think there's a lot of value that you can gain of improving the information and change and collaboration.
Yeah. And so it's a kind of digitalization of that onboarding process.
Yes.
In a kind of platform software package. Yeah. Okay, clear. Yeah. And of course, so this is now no longer your first startup. Yes, you have this huge experience with Exporo. So you are what we call a serial entrepreneur. How does that make a difference? So if you now look at how you are setting up Smace, are there things that you do very different from Exporo based on your experiences?
Hopefully. No. But Exporo was a success, yes, and it was a great time, honestly, especially the early years of founding a company. There was, but things that I want to improve on a personal level is so Exporo was really, really intense in the early years, and I think intense is good, but it should always be at balance with your normal life. And the other thing is that premature scaling is something that we really try to avoid. So finding product market fit before scaling it too much, I think is super important. From what I've seen and I've experienced myself.
But because that's interesting, because you're saying we first want to establish product market fit, and then we go for full scaling. But is actually scaling not the indicator of product market fit?
I think there are at least some early indicators that should be there before. So,
can you give some examples?
Yeah, I think so examples of what I see now in our case, what I want to see is that adoption of our product is there. So, and I could imagine cases where we with Smace go out now, get some funding, and then heavily invest in sales rather than product development. So, does it mean that I would not take in funding now? I would say it's okay to take some funding, but everybody should be on the same plate. That currently it's about developing a product that has high adoptions, and only once we see those adoptions, and then go and invest heavily in sales. So also from people that we would probably currently use in sales, it's much more talking to people about the problems, finding the right feature sets that helps our customers, and so on and so forth. And it would be easy to already at that point heavily invest. I would.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I listened this weekend to a podcast with Andriessen from Andriessen Horowitz, and he was saying like there are actually two ways in which you can build a startup. One is you initially spent a lot of time on product development and fine tuning, and you only really start scaling when you have the feeling it's fully ready. It's a bit the Apple model, yeah. So it's a full product. Or you apply more like the Facebook approach. You just launch a prototype, you scale, and you try to improve it along the way, and you accept that there will be a lot of bugs in your product. If I listen to you, might it be that Exporo was more the Facebook model and that you now try to apply more the Apple model, or is that exaggerated?
I think we had product market fit with Exporo in the early days,
Okay.
but then the pressure was quite high to have a second product line. And we had, so at that time we bought our own real estate and then structured. So it was more about this cash flow of real estates to make it accessible for everybody. And there we thought we already have a product market fit, or we loved the idea so much. And then there was a lot of funding. And then we said, okay, now we go live. And then not only in one market, but already at that time, 3 markets in parallel. And so that was definitely a little bit premature. And I would try to avoid that. Overall, I can both approaches. I really like them. So I also like to go live with not ready products and then really use the initial feedback to further develop it. And that was always something that I did with Henrik, my co-founder, because he is not this tech guy who doesn't want to talk to the customer. He is really someone who really, so actually we are both not product experts, but we really like product.
Yes, okay.
And solutions, of course, it's even more important.
Yeah. Now, I was also triggered by what you were saying. You were saying, okay, when I want to do something maybe now better or different, I want to get a better balance between the startup and my private life. And I think that's a very good goal, but is it actually realistic? Sometimes I have a feeling when I look at these founders in the WO ecosystem that, if you decide to go all in with a startup, it's all in, and your kind of your private life, it's very difficult to establish that balance. What is your opinion at the moment?
I think I would be, at least I'm much more aware of this thing. So I really try to balance this a little bit more. And can
you give specific examples how you do that? Because trying is nice, but can you give me concrete kind of examples of how you try to establish that?
Yeah, I think not working every weekend is already something. So I have 3 kids who also want time, and especially in with Exporo, especially in the early days, I would say I was not so an easy father. Today it's much more important for me. So I try to spend also time with them and also with friends and family. So not having that would already alarm myself. I think currently it's really difficult because we don't have funding yet, and that's actually also planned. Only a couple of business angels have invested, and the only 2 of us. So it's only Henrik and me. So I cannot even leverage myself utilizing people that are working with me. So that's not easy. So it's really about focusing on the right stuff, and especially in the early days of a startup, everything seems to be at least be important.
Yeah, but is it then also something that you have discussed with your new co-founder? Like, look, I want to do this with you, but please take into account that I also want to have a healthy family life, which seems a kind of trade-off.
There is a trade-off, but I think we have a similar idea there. So he likes to work hard like me, but for example, he has also a kid and he's a surfer, and on a regular basis he's going to Lisbon and taking his bus there, going off for a weekend. He's available there. It's not about saying, oh, I'm off and not available, but at least trying to balance a little bit fun part of life and working. But even though I love working, I love building something. So it's not but it's a lot about balancing.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned your age already, so I don't think it's a big secret that you're in your 40s, which it's a bit older than most of the WHU startup guys that we typically have on our podcast. Now, actually, again, in my teaching, I always explain to my students, if you look at the statistics, the most successful founders are actually founders in their 40s, not in their 20s. So maybe you actually have a much higher likelihood to strike success than these young 20-year-old guys in hoodies. But nevertheless, what do you actually see as the core advantages of creating a startup when you're already a bit older?
I'm not sure if there are any advantages, but on the other side, I don't think there are also not many disadvantages. Of course, I can argue about experience and so on and so forth, but overall, I would say experience can also be misleading, because sometimes you think you already know the answer, and then you realize, okay, it's not the case, or you don't realize it. That's even worse. So.
Yeah, but let me give me my own example. So I'm 46. So even a bit older than you. And I have to say, if I compare myself with 20 years ago when I had a deadline for a publication, I could work until 3 a.m. in the morning and just go like crazy. Today, to be honest, I simply physically would no longer be able to do that. So I try to avoid at any cost that I get these kind of stress moments where I have to work until 3 a.m. in the morning. So it shows me that maybe physically I have some limitations. At the same time, I think I have the capabilities to avoid that I get in that kind of situations where I have to work until 3 a.m. to meet certain deadlines. Do you see that kind of differences, or is this just something related to me personally?
So, first of all, I think from a physical point of view, I was never fitter than today, even though I was for 2 years in the army, mountain climber, and sort of. So I would say today, I just recently had my first marathon. It was better than I expected. So physically, actually, that's also something that I learned in the first founding of Exporo. I didn't do a lot of to my body, and it was really, I was eating pizza and so on and so forth. So I think from a physical point of view, I'm much fitter than at that time. Yes, working long is also, I realized that it's getting a little bit harder. Therefore, I try the approach to wake up a little bit earlier. But I only recently started with that. So this 5 a.m. clubs. So the book is a little bit stupid, but the idea of waking up early is, I think, quite good. And of course, Dries, I think you're expert, at least from a LinkedIn post. I think ChatGPT helps a lot to leverage your capability, even without any employees.
But so you guys also in this startup are actively using ChatGPT in applications, or you at least experimenting with it?
Not so much in the application yet. Henrik is also, even though he's a techie, he's a little bit critical about some stuff. He knows that it is, of course, revolutionizing a lot, but conceptually he has at least some question marks at some points to how it will ultimately really, really create something new. And but I leverage it quite a lot, because when it is about building a pitch deck, or I don't know, challenging my ideas, I think it's really good to shorten the brainstorming process, I would say.
No, and I agree. I think we are now incorporating it in quite some of our teaching. And what I always say to my students, I think at the moment, it's a very useful tool that you don't have to start from a blank page. So actually, I think today, nobody should ever start from a blank Word file, a blank PowerPoint, or a blank Excel. Then you have just ignored the potential of ChatGPT. Can it help you to make the perfect Word document, the perfect PowerPoint? No, I don't think so yet. So I think at the moment, at least the productivity gains are mainly in just giving you a kind of first draft that you then can fine tune. That seems to be what you're also doing then.
Yeah. And I really like that because that's really where I struggle sometimes. So really having a blank page, and then or it used to be, and today it's really. And then I start to discuss with ChatGPT, and then that is it really that way or that way? So I'm not sure. I'm a good prompt engineer, but at least I see results and I see iterations. So it's I really like it.
Okay. Maybe one final age-related question. So you are participating in the WAO Accelerator, so the program where we try to assist some startups, in your case, Smace, to accelerate, to help you making it to the next stage. And again, I think you're a bit older than most of our participants, and I think even a bit older than most of the mentors and investors that we have. So that's something I'm really wondering. So we organize these mentor mayhem weeks in which you get exposed to a lot of mentors, a lot of investors. And as I always hear, these people tend to be quite critical. They give constructive advice, but they're also quite critical. Now, to be very honest, let's say it about myself. If I would have a mentor week where 20-year-olds starts bashing my academic research, I might sometimes be a bit like, you 20-year-old guy or girl, who are you to tell me how I should do my research? Is that difficult for you, or is it?
Maybe that's a difference between academic research and founding a startup.
Maybe we have two big egos. That might be the case.
No, but honestly, of course, it feels a little bit weird. So stepping in there and making myself and my idea or our idea vulnerable, but I think it's really such an efficient way to get feedback. So and to get input. Yeah. So having their 80 people talking with you about the idea with a professional background. Of course, they are maybe not our core users, but they have seen also different use cases, and having them say yes, and it helped us a lot to be much more sharp in our message and where we want to get, even though it maybe doesn't come across. But in the beginning, we were not so sure about where in the sales process we are located. And also, if we should be industry agnostic, which our software is. So the software itself is industry agnostic, can be used for everything. But as soon as you are industry agnostic, the people are also trying, asking questions and so forth. So at least focusing in the beginning on a beachhead market, which is super crystal clear, where the problem definitely exists, makes totally sense for us to us now, and was something that is an outcome of the mentor process.
Yeah, okay. Because then, in terms of reaching product market fit, what are a bit at the moment the core kind of challenges and objectives that you have?
So we have our first version, which we have built until Easter. It was already in the state where we could have used it with customers, but Henrik said, I don't want to use it with customers because after I want to be free to throw everything away and to be completely free. I don't want to have any integration issues, headaches later on. So we sold it to many people, but we didn't have them really use it on real cases. So now we have the second phase. And within the next 2 weeks, we will have finished it. And then it's really about beta testing. So having the first beta customers, so finding the right beta customers, and then having them also use the platform as something that is currently our struggle. And also from that perspective, because we already talked about SaaS software when we in the Mentor Mayhem program, but then there were some critical remarks that, okay, yes, we totally get your problem that you want to solve. And you should really focus on the small scale-up companies in the SaaS business that are currently really having this onboarding issue. So where you really have product market fit, and now onboarding becomes your bottleneck. So that's where your solution can really add a lot of value. And we said, okay, yes. Also, yes, makes sense. It's not rocket science, but it's always good to talk to people about your idea and where to find the right startups.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, then maybe we always at the end have some traditional questions that we want to ask our guests. If you actually look back to your own career, what advice would you actually give to your younger self? So when you were studying law, maybe the advice would be don't study law. I don't know. But what kind of advice would you give to yourself?
Well, actually, I loved to study law. So that was really...
Okay.
But I also realized that I never want to become a lawyer because... and that's also something that was proven afterwards, because especially in funding rounds, you talk until night and then the lawyers need to work. So that's that's really a painful job. No, it's going out and it's really about not only thinking about it, but taking the first step. Maybe I also needed to become 42 to be that convinced of myself and to really step out and do it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because indeed, and that's sometimes that we learn, our students, is also actually in your 40s you might be more successful as an entrepreneur, but actually taking the step to become an entrepreneur might be more difficult because you have what we call the golden handcuff problem, namely you have already made investments, you bought a house, you have kids that also you need to invest in, to say it like that, which might kind of create a level of conservatism that make you decide for a more stable job than an entrepreneurial job. But in your case, despite you have an executive MBA certificate that would help you to do a corporate career, you really want to go for the startup life, I have the feeling, not?
Yes, that's definitely the case. I was in the corporate life, but and I don't say politics everywhere in corporate life, but that was something that I really realized. So I want to be independent. I want to build something on my own. It doesn't mean that I know the best what's the best, but at least I want to have a couple of people with the same missions, the same purpose, that are looking into the same direction. So I think that's something that really is inspiring myself. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then finally, can you give us some specific recommendations of books or podcasts that you're listening to or books that you're reading that for you are very inspiring? And they don't have to be business related. If you get inspired by very different things, then please share with us.
I really love Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Shit and shit. And so I really love him. He's more philosophically, and I like his way of thinking, and I get inspired by it.
Can you explain a bit more what he's saying? Because to be honest, I've never heard of him.
Mark Manson?
No.
So the subtle art of not giving a shit is really about what do you really. So the basic idea is you only have a certain number of fucks that you can care about in your life, and you should focus on the important parts and the important stuff.
Yeah.
And it's I think he's always taking real cases and philosophical ideas and trying to combine it and making sense of it. So, and his second book, or he has some more, but was a little bit about hope and religion and how much is it. Yeah, anyways, it's really a good read, and it's also entertaining. So, and I think probably you heard a lot about the people. It's the hard thing about the hard thing, but that's really something that inspired me from the entrepreneurial point of view. Currently, I'm reading the 5 a.m. Club, but I don't like the book, so it's really not good. But I like the idea.
But so the 5 a.m. Club means that you get up at 5 a.m. I suppose.
Yes.
Or?
Yeah, but I only tried that for a couple of days now. But it's really amazing what you can get done between 5 and 8, and it's really crazy.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that it's productive in terms of business, but you have done maybe some exercises, you have done some thinking, maybe read the newspaper, which I have a Zeit-Abo, but I don't read it normally. But now I find the time.
But then is the logic you get up earlier and you go to sleep earlier, I suppose, also? Or?
Yeah, and that's the part that I haven't managed yet.
Because otherwise it's not really...
not so sustainable, yes. Maybe it's also part of the becoming older part. So you get up early and don't need so much sleep anymore.
That's true. Okay. Björn, thanks a lot for exchanging. I really liked some of the insights that we shared and the discussion we had about like things like serial entrepreneur age, because these are things that we also discuss with our students. And sometimes I think some of the insights are quite counterintuitive. It's not always what you would expect. Entrepreneurship is not always the sexy 20-year-old that is extremely successful. I think there is hope for us as 40 years old. There is still hope for us to be successful. So that's always nice to know.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. And to our audience, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please come back to us for the next episodes we will have this summer. Bye.
Bye.